Welcome to Regulate This, a really unfiltered podcast.
Introducing Regulate This, an RIA-ly unfiltered podcast that breaks down all things compliance and business with me, Tracie Behr, and my lovely co-host, Leila Shaver.
Hello. What are we talking about today, Tracie?
Well, today is going to be really exciting, so thank you everyone for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about succession planning. I know that doesn't seem like the most exciting topic, but when you need it, you hope that you've done everything that you should have. And most of us are lacking, so it's a very important topic. It's kind of like, for those of you out there that are the advisors, people developing an investment strategy, choosing to do something instead of waiting. For those of you that are doing additional planning, like estate planning, folks sometimes don't want to think about the fact that they may be incapacitated at some point in their life. But as we all saw during COVID, it could happen to anyone at any time without notice. So it's vital that we do it. If we wait until the day we need it, it's too late. It's kind of like insurance. You know, we'd love to be able to call the insurance agent and not pay for the premiums until we needed it and call them and say, my house is burning down. I'm ready for that insurance to go through. So go ahead and do my first premium payment. Of course, they would not be able to do that. It's too late. You're going to be just left with a bunch of ashes. The same is true of your business. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So, I know. I'm preaching. So, this is one of those things that allows you to speak from the hospital bed prior to, speak from the grave. It allows you to get... It allows you to get all of those things, all of those wishes planned so that your best friend, your business partner, your favorite colleagues, your spouse isn't saying, I know what Tracie really wants, when they might not have a flipping clue. Tracie might not reveal everything to them all the time. There may be certain things or certain feelings that she has that they're unaware of. They may think that nobody has been a better confidant, has been a better supporter, has given more to Tracie than me. And then they find out in the end that Tracie did not feel that way. So this allows you as the business owner to determine how will the business keep going when you can't. How will the business keep going? And it doesn't even have to be that you're infirmed or you're incapacitated or that you're deceased. It could be that you took that once in a lifetime vacation that you've always wanted to take. You finally, after years and years of planning, decided to go to the remote overwater bungalows in the Maldives before it ends up in the ocean. But now you don't have service or there's a tropical storm. And so unfortunately you have no access. And so basically you're out of commission. What happens then? It could even be a disaster. So there are lots of reasons to do this. And by doing this, you're not sealing your own fate. You're not signing a pact with the devil. You're not saying, if I sign this today, I'm burying myself tomorrow or I'm retiring tomorrow. What you're saying is if something happens and I'm not available, I know that my clients aren't going to be harmed. I know that my team isn't going to be harmed. And I know that my family is still going to be able to get some type of compensation or something moving even when I'm not. So with that said, all of that gloom and doom, but also all of the positive way that this could actually keep things going, Leila, what are some of the things that you see when people call in and are either avoiding or haven't gotten to succession planning yet?
I mean, listen, no one wants to face the idea of their own mortality. No one wants to think about what happens if I'm incapacitated, right? What happens if I pass away unexpectedly or expectedly? But at the end of the day, the average age of a financial advisor is 67 years old. I'm going to say the thing you're not supposed to say, but we're all thinking you're much closer to the grave in many ways, at least age-wise. But hell, I'm 38 today. I could die tomorrow. I like to think of myself as a little bit of a spring chicken in comparison to the industry. But that's the thing. I mean, the things can happen unexpectedly. I fly planes, I drive in cars, I walk outside my house. I mean, there are things that can happen all the time, and you have to think about what's going to happen to my clients, who's going to continue servicing them, who's going to continue running the business, right? Who's going to continue operations, who's going to have the power to bind the company legally to different contracts. Or be able to provide those services. I mean, you've really got to think about those things in the same way in which you would do estate planning for yourself personally, and you would have a will and trust, healthcare directive, power of attorney, those kinds of things. You really need to have that for your business. So from that perspective, it's different depending on the size. If you're a solo practitioner and something happens to you, who the hell's going to step in, right? So for a lot of solo practitioners, it's about finding another advisor that they can engage in a buy-sell agreement with. So if something happens to me, you have the opportunity to buy my business. If something happens to you, I have the opportunity to buy your business. It's creating a continuity agreement with another advisor. So maybe it's not that you would buy it, but that you would step in and either temporarily or longer term service my clients and kind of wind up the business kind of perspective. So there's different ways to approach it from that perspective. If you have multiple advisors, there might be someone internally that you've identified as an appropriate successor to the business. If you don't have anyone internally because you're all old as fuck, then maybe you've identified some external people who could be potentially purchasers of your business. I think the challenge, though, either way you look at it, is the value of these RIA businesses has grown so much, where a lot of solo practitioners started the businesses and grown and have retained 100% ownership because now their businesses are valued at 3, 4, 5, 6. I've seen up to 15x their revenue. The next generation of owners, it's not going to be a single owner. It is very rare and very unlikely to find a single person that will be able to afford to buy 100% of your equity. So part of thinking about succession is not thinking about leaving it to one person. Part of it's thinking about leaving it to a group of people. And then how are you going to structure those deals, right? You can do it with life insurance. You can do it, build out the methodology into the contract. You can agree to the evaluation by a third party who will do the valuing. But it's also making sure that you're training that next generation of owner on what the business is about. What are the core values of the business? What is the value proposition? Why are these clients coming to you rather than any one of the other financial advisors that may be accessible to them locally? You've got to train your next gen successors on this. But you also have to keep in mind that maybe the next gen wants to do things a little differently. How attached are you to the firm that you leave behind, continuing down the path you started with it? These are hard questions for some people because there's something, I've been doing this for 40 years and I've known these clients for 40 years. I'm not going to let some young person come and change it all up, but you have to realize the world is changing, and the world is changing around us. I remember still using a typewriter. If I tell my children now what a typewriter is, they'll be like, what? You did what? A rotary phone? Are you kidding? My parents still have a rotary phone in their house. I used it when I was a kid. What the hell is a rotary phone? You know, like that's something my kids, they didn't know. They haven't grown up. They'd be like, what the heck? Or I love watching those TikTok videos or whatever of kids with like kids these days with floppy disks. And they're like, what the hell is this? Where does this go? What does this do? You know, like or giving them like a regular, like a rotary phone. They're like, how do you make this work? Like, how, and it's funny because we used it, but the world changes and things change, technology change, the next generation of consumer changes and what they want and see out of the businesses they're utilizing. So there's a lot to consider when you're thinking about succession planning.
Yeah, there is. When you were going through that, I was thinking about all the things like my kids hearing me say, I was invented before the internet was. And they're like, what? Like they don't believe that that's possible. They think that the internet basically has been around forever. But it's not only the solo people. Think about the people that are in partnerships. If something happens to you, that makes it even hairier because now your spouse is having to deal with your business partners. And if your spouse isn't somebody that is extremely business savvy, or if there isn't a love connection between the spouse and the business partners, or maybe it's not you, maybe it's your business partner that passes or that's incapacitated and you have to deal with their spouse.
Yep.
And the thought of that gives you the willies because you know that they're maybe not business savvy or they're not reasonable or they're emotionally connected. And so their idea of what's fair is far different than maybe reality because our emotions tend to tell us that something is far more valuable than it is because it's an emotional connection. And, that's why in law, we talk about fair market value, because if we just did what people thought their stuff was worth, oftentimes it could be somebody else's trash is the other person's treasure, right? Like, the rest of us might think that's not worth anything, but the person that raised it or the person that started it or the person that invested their time or resources in it or the spouse that missed out on a lot of family interactions because their spouse was building this company, to them, this company better be worth a lot because their family missed out on a lot. And so in those situations, you often have problematic issues as well. I mean, in the legal field, there are very few states that allow a non-attorney to own a law firm. So if your spouse isn't an attorney, you have to figure out, what am I going to do with my firm? Because they can't own it, right? Somebody else has to. So, if you're the only licensed advisor and all of your partners are doing the business work and something happens to you, who's going to be the licensed advisor? Who's going to keep it running? Does the business collapse? If you're dealing with their family or their friends or whoever they want their portion to go to, what does that look like? How much now are they going to be involved? What is their say going to be? Do they step in the shoes of that person or do they get financially compensated? I mean, those are all things that you have to think through because you can imagine how much trouble can come out of not having those conversations prior to, because perhaps your partners have had those conversations with their spouse, but they haven't had it with you. And so the spouse thinks one way and you have a far different idea.
Well, and I mean, I've seen it on the other end when the owner has passed away and there hasn't been a plan in place. So, a few years back, I was talking to this widow and her husband died unexpectedly, kind of an illness that declined very quickly, and he had no plan. And she had assumed he did. So when he passed, there was no plan in place to, like a business continuity plan that would short-term take care of the business because of a key man incident, right? Him passing away. There was no succession plan. And by the time she got around to, grieving and then starting to look into his affairs and kind of figure out where things were, a lot of these clients had already left the firm and gone to other advisors. And the whole value of the business is based on your book. It's all the clients you have, the amount of assets you manage. Clients are within their right to leave your firm and go find another financial advisor. You don't own them from that perspective. So if you don't have a plan in place, and especially if you're a solo or smaller practice, and no one is returning their calls, no one's responding to them, they found out you died and they have no one else to go to, they're leaving. The value of your book diminishes with every client that leaves. So this widow was left with nothing because there was nothing left of the book. They had all moved on at that point. We have another case where it's a family. The dad died. The dad was a financial advisor. He signed an agreement literally on his deathbed with another advisor as a solicitor, and the firm is like, we don't allow solicitors, so we're not going to allow this guy to pay you, right? It was done while this guy was on his deathbed, probably didn't really look into whether this agreement would work with the buyer's current firm, etc. And his family's been working for over a year trying to get some compensation out of this guy. And the firm's counsel has basically flipped us off and said, move on. The advisors basically flipped off the family and said, move on. So the only recourse now is to go initiate a legal action. And that's time and money. Don't leave your family in that kind of a predicament. Don't do that to them. Take the time to plan, be a responsible entrepreneur. Think about these things, however difficult or morbid they may seem, because you're building something of value. And if you're preaching to your clients about leaving a legacy and having a plan and all that stuff, then follow your own damn advice.
Definitely don't be the mechanic whose car is on blocks in their front yard. Don't be the hairdresser that has needed a haircut for months. Don't be the people that give great advice to others but allow your own life to languish and hang in the balance. Especially since you brought up another good point. Part of thinking through this are thinking about what happens and who can fill in, but also how does that add expense to our firm that we haven't had to endure before? And in some cases, you may say, let's say that it's a business partnership and I'm the partner that does all of the operational stuff and make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and that the planes arrive on time and everything happens the way it's supposed to. If I leave, who is stepping in my shoes? Having key person insurance is something that can be helpful because that can help you source an adequate replacement. If the thought is, hey, we know what's going to happen to Tracie shares, but we're going to need to find somebody externally to replace Tracie, then having that key person insurance that will fund that recruitment effort, because it's expensive and it usually takes in a higher level position like a CEO or a COO or something like that, CFO. It takes 6 months of recruiting to try to find a candidate, and sometimes it takes an additional 6 months to a year to get their sea legs under them. So your business could be looking at a year to 18 months before you're back to where you were when that original person had cheeks in the seat in that role. So making sure that you have something that's going to help you get vendors that can fill in the gaps or have support that can fill in the gaps monetarily, that key person insurance is super helpful. But you can't think about those things or plan out those things or find the ways that you can shore up the things that you're not quite sure how they're going to function if you aren't thinking about it, working through it, and talking about it. If you're not thinking about who's going to do the day-to-day, who's going to do the marketing, who's going to look at the financials, who's able to write a freaking check. If something happens to be and I am the only signer on the account, what happens if somebody decides to cash out and needs to have their money moved? Who can authorize that? Who can authorize these different things that really can put us in harm's way and get us sued by our clients if we aren't able to actively perform? Think about all of those things that land on your shoulder as the person doing it, or on your business partner's shoulder. Who will do that after you're gone, or if you're not available, if you're out of the country, if you're not available by phone, if something like COVID would happen? I know I had family members that got stuck in Spain. I know it sounds like a hardship, really. But, they had intentions of coming home, and then all of the airports got shut down and you weren't able to leave. And they got stuck for almost 2.5 months. before they were able to come home. Now, if they hadn't planned on staying there for that time, which they hadn't, and they didn't have access to everything that they normally would, or because you're a financial services firm and you're doing things, oftentimes you have firewalls with your IT that don't allow people from other countries to, be able to hack into your system. So working remotely thinking, oh, I just go to an Apple store and I'd buy all the equipment and then I'd be able to log in. You may not be able to. You may have a firewall that prevents somebody from Spain to work in your environment. So unless you've thought through all that stuff, you may be creating more headaches rather than being helpful.
Well, it's not even your own firewalls. A lot of custodians, in order to ensure that they're not unlawfully conducting business in another country without being appropriately set up in that country, they'll block IP addresses. So trying to access your CRM, let's say you use a Redtail, you're trying to get into Schwab, those may be blocked by those vendors. So you can't access from abroad. That's a really good point. So, I think succession planning, there's business continuity, right? Which we think about in terms of more short-term disaster recovery, right? I'm in Florida. There was a hurricane. It was a category 4 or 5. This happened to our team last year where we had 3 people in the Florida area and they were out of power for a week. No power, no internet. It took us a few days, as I recall, to even get confirmation that their homes were still okay, that they were able to still inhabit their homes and they weren't being evacuated or didn't have to find a temporary shelter while they worked on repairs to their home. So there's business continuity from that perspective. COVID is a good example, right? That was a longer term issue. Having a business continuity and plan in place for that. And then there's the longer term, right? Like succession planning. What happens when you retire, you're incapacitated, you pass away? What happens? That needs to be planned out because you've worked hard to build this business. You want something of value that your family can have, right, as part of your legacy. But you also want to make sure that your clients are being taken care of. Think about it. With COVID, the markets crashed. Imagine if you were someone who got very ill. My husband was in the ICU with COVID the week North Carolina shut down. And at the time, there was no test to confirm it was COVID. Every other test came back negative. They didn't know what it was. The hospitals were filling up. Now imagine if he was a financial advisor and the markets crashed at that time. State of North Carolina shuts down. All these other states shut down. The market tanks. And you're in the hospital. And there's no one there to respond to this market fluctuation. You may be on your deathbed, but you've reached your fiduciary duty. And I've seen it. I've seen regulators take enforcement action, hold advisors responsible. I've seen it with people with mental health issues that were like bipolar and going through a manic episode. I've seen it with people who were in surgery or they were ill. For many states, a growing number of states in the SEC, it's actually a breach of fiduciary duty if you don't have a succession plan, if you don't have a continuity plan. Because you have to put the interest of your clients ahead of your own. You have to do what's in the best interest of them. And part of that has been interpreted to mean you need to have a plan if there is a business disruption, if there is a key man incident, if something happens to the primary owner, the licensed person. To your point, Tracie, when we're talking about who's going to take over, our industry, we have licensed and unlicensed people. Unlicensed people can't work as licensed people with no license. So you've got to have a backup plan for your licensed people. You've got to have a backup plan for your non-licensed people. There's a lot to think about, but you need to start thinking about it now and then putting pen to paper and memorializing it and documenting it and entering into agreements with other people and then sign the damn agreement. I can't tell you how many times we do all that work and then the agreement doesn't get signed. And then it means nothing. So then when the event happens, that paper means nothing because no one signed it.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And the beautiful thing is there are people like us out there that can help you with this as well. So you're not in this alone. Reach out to us if this is something that you know that you're lacking, if this is an area that you haven't visited, if this is something that you know you need to do and you've been putting off. Check us out at www.myralawyer.com. Set up a consultation, get this done. This is something that is not only a safety net for you, but also for your clients and for the people that you care about. It's the same reasons you're telling your clients to get in there and get this done for themselves. You need to take that advice too. You need to make sure that you're adequately protected, that your clients are adequately protected, that your family and your legacy are adequately protected. So with that, make sure that you reach out to us and tune in again next time to Regulate This, anywhere that you listen to your podcast, Spotify, Apple, so on and so forth. You'll find us there.
Remember, everyone, good compliance is good business, and it only benefits you to plan ahead.